meant to do with all that enormous lot of horses, and why he had not exerted his wits to catch the red deer as well. He said that the latter would have been against the laws of venery, and might have brought him into trouble; but as for disposing of his stud, it would give him little difficulty. He would break them when the spring weather came on, and deal with them as they required, and keep the handsomest for breeding. The rest he would dispatch to London, where he knew plenty of horse dealers; and he doubted not that they would fetch him as much as £10 apiece all round, being now in great demand. I told him I wished that he might get it; but as it proved afterwards, he did. Then he pressed us both on another point, the time for his marriage to Annie; and mother looked at me to say when, and I looked back at mother. However, knowing something of the world, and unable to make any further objections by reason of his prosperity, I said that we must even do as the fashionable people did, and allow the maid herself to settle when she would leave home and all. And this I spoke with a very bad grace, being perhaps of an ancient caste, and over fond of honesty; I mean, of course, among lower people. But Tom paid little heed to this, knowing the world a great deal better than ever I could pretend to do; and being ready to take a thing, upon which he had set his mind, whether it came with a good grace, or whether it came with a bad one. And seeing that it would be awkward to provoke my anger, he left the room before more words, to submit himself to Annie. Upon this I went in search of Lorna, to tell her of our cousin's arrival, and to ask whether she would think fit to see him, or to dine by herself that day; for she should do exactly as it pleased her in everything, while remaining still our guest. But I rather wished that she might choose not to sit in Tom's company, though she might be introduced to him; not but what he could behave quite as well as I could, and much better as regarded elegance and assurance, only that his honesty had not been as one might desire. But Lorna had some curiosity to know what this famous man was like, and declared that she would by all means have the pleasure of dining with him, if he did not object to her company, on the ground of the Doones' dishonesty. Moreover, she said that it would seem a most foolish air on her part, and one which would cause the greatest pain to Annie, who had been so good to her, if she should refuse to sit at a table with a man who held the King's pardon, and was now a pattern of honesty. Against this I had not a word to say, and could not help acknowledging in my heart that she was right, as well as wise in her decision. And afterwards I discovered that mother would have been much displeased if she had decided otherwise. Accordingly she turned away, with one of her very sweetest smiles, whose beauty none can describe, saying that she must not meet a man of such fashion and renown in her common gardening frock, but must try to look as nice as she could, if only in honour of dear Annie. And truth to tell, when she came to dinner, everything about her was the neatest and the prettiest that can possibly be imagined. She contrived to match the colours so, to suit one another and her own, and yet with a certain delicate harmony of contrast; and the shape of everything was so nice, that when she came into the room with a crown of winning modesty upon the consciousness of beauty, I was quite as proud as if the Queen of England entered. My mother could not help remarking, though she knew that it was not mannerly, how like a princess Lorna looked, now she had her best things on. But two things caught Squire Faggus's eyes, after he had made a most gallant bow, and had received a most graceful courtesy; and he kept his bright bold gaze upon them, first on one, and then on the other, until my darling was hot with blushes, and I was ready to knock him down, if he had not been our visitor. But here again I should have been wrong, as I was apt to be in those days; for Tom intended no harm whatever, and his gaze was of pure curiosity, though Annie herself was vexed with it. The two objects of his close regard were, first, and most worthily, Lorna's face, and secondly, the ancient necklace restored to her by Sir Ensor Doone. Now, wishing to save my darling's comfort, and to keep things quiet, I shouted out that dinner was ready, so that half the parish could hear me; upon which my mother laughed, and chid me, and dispatched her guests before her. And a very good dinner we made, I remember, and a very happy one, attending to the women first, as now is the manner of eating, except among the workmen. With them, of course, it is needful that the man, who has his hours fixed, should be served first, and make the utmost of his time for feeding, while the women may go on as much as ever they please afterwards. But with us, who are not bound to time, there is no such reason to be quoted; and the women being the weaker vessels, should be the first to begin to fill; and so we always arranged it. Now though our Annie was a graceful maid, and Lizzie a very learned one, you should have seen how differently Lorna managed her dining. She never took more than about a quarter of a mouthful at a time, and she never appeared to be chewing that, although she must have done so. Indeed, she appeared to dine as if it were a matter of no consequence, and as if she could think of other things more than of her business. All this, and her own manner of eating, I described to Eliza once, when I wanted to vex her for something very spiteful that she had said; and I never succeeded so well before, for the girl was quite outrageous, having her own perception of it, which made my observation 10 times as bitter to her. And I am not sure but what she ceased to like poor Lorna from that day; and if so, I was quite paid out, as I well deserved, for my bit of satire. For it strikes me that of all human dealings, satire is the very lowest and most mean and common. It is the equivalent in words for what bullying is in deeds, and no more bespeaks a clever man than the other does a brave one. These two wretched tricks exalt a fool in his own low esteem, but never in his neighbour's, for the deep common sense of our nature tells that no man of a genial heart, or of any spread of mind, can take pride in either. And though a good man may commit the one fault or the other now and then, by way of outlet, he is sure to have compunction soon, and to scorn himself more than the sufferer. Now when the young maidens were gone (for we had quite a high dinner of fashion that day, with Betty Muxworthy waiting, and Gwenny Carfax at the gravy, and only mother and Tom and I remained at the white deal table, with brandy and schnapps and hot water jugs), Squire Faggus said quite suddenly, and perhaps on purpose to take us aback, in case of our hiding anything, "What do you know of the history of that beautiful maiden, good mother?" "Not half so much as my son does," mother answered, with a soft smile at me; "and when John does not choose to tell a thing, wild horses will not pull it out of him." "That is not at all like me, mother," I replied rather sadly. "You know almost every word about Lorna quite as well as I do." "Almost every word, I believe, John, for you never tell a falsehood. But the few unknown may be of all the most important to me." To this I made no answer, for fear of going beyond the truth, or else of making mischief. Not that I had, or wished to have, any mystery with mother; neither was there, in purest truth, any mystery in the matter, to the utmost of my knowledge; and the only things that I had kept back, solely for mother's comfort, were the death of poor Lord Alan Brandir, if indeed he were dead, and the connection of Marwood de Whichehalse with the dealings of the Doones, and the threats of Carver Doone against my own prosperity; and, maybe, one or two little things, harrowing more than edifying. "Come, come," said Master Faggus, smiling very pleasantly, "you two understand each other, if any two on earth do. Ah, if I had only had a mother, how different I might have been." And with that he sighed, in the tone which always overcame mother upon that subject, and had something to do with his getting any. And then he produced his pretty box, full of rolled tobacco, and offered me one, as I now had joined the goodly company of smokers. So I took it, and watched what he did with his own, lest I might go wrong with mine. But when our cylinders were both lighted, and I enjoying mine wonderfully, and astonishing mother by my skill, Tom Faggus told us that he was sure he had seen my Lorna's face before, many and many years ago, when she was quite a little child; but he could not remember where it was, or anything more about it at present, though he would try to do so afterwards. He could not be mistaken, he said, for he had noticed her eyes especially, and had never seen such eyes before, neither again, until this day. I asked him if he had ever ventured into the Doone valley, but he shook his head, and replied that he valued his life a deal too much for that. Then we put it to him whether anything might assist his memory, but he said that he knew not of aught to do so, unless it were another glass of schnapps. This being provided, he grew very wise, and told us clearly and candidly that we were both very foolish. For he said that we were keeping Lorna at the risk not only of our stock, and the house above our heads, but also of our precious lives; and after all, was she worth it, although so very beautiful? Upon which I told him, with indignation, that her beauty was the least part of her goodness, and that I would thank him for his opinion when I had requested it. "Bravo, our John Ridd," he answered; "fools will be fools till the end of the chapter, and I might be as big a one, if I were in thy shoes, John. Nevertheless, in the name of God, don't let that helpless child go about, with a thing worth half the county on her." "She is worth all the county herself," said I, "and all England put together; but she has nothing worth half a rick of hay upon her, for the ring I gave her cost only—" and here I stopped, for mother was looking, and I never would tell her how much it had cost me, though she had tried 50 times to find out. "Tush, the ring!" Tom Faggus cried, with a contempt that moved me. "I would never have stopped a man for that. But the necklace, you great oaf, the necklace is worth all your farm put together, and your Uncle Ben's fortune to the back of it, ay, and all the town of Dulverton." 'What,' said I, 'that common glass